for anyone
Well,
right there on that
oh,
table.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not cold, but.
I don't, I forgot to bring mine, thanks.
Yeah. That drink's downstairs.
I know, I didn't realize, well, I took the, like the fancy drinks, I didn't see any other ones,
Fancy drink, yeah, there were coolers there too.
so.
I don't think they have them first though. I didn't see them when I first got one of those red drinks.
There were
And all of a sudden I was like,
Aha.
so,
no beer.
yeah, no,
None of
open
that.
bar.
No.
They don't do a bartending class, we found out.
Yeah, mixology.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, we got a new president. Talk to him about it and say, hey, we discovered some needs that we
You know
have.
what you're missing in this place? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we're gonna get that from them.
They actually cannot wait for this all this season to make that one.
They have meetings and it's all they're gonna do what is
It's like
it?
$40 a bottle.
Horticulture?
Yeah.
They
Greenhouse.
handcraft like 12 bucks. So.
All right, good afternoon. I understand we're later than we intended to be. What you just witnessed was the tail end of a succession process in a public college. And the beginning of that process was a president retired. It was Kelly. She was there. You may have, they introduced her, and she retired last April. She retired in January, but she worked through the end of April, and by February they had selected who was going to be appointed interim as president before they found a replacement president. And that was in May, when on Kelly's last day in April, they announced the interim president officially to be Jordan Rushton, who they just announced as president. But that didn't make him president. That was an interim president, which means that he stepped out of his job. He was vice president. He stepped out of that job and stepped into the role of president of the college until the state decided on who was going to become appointed as the full-time long-term college president. And so he's been operating in that function. Now when you think about that function, he has the responsibility of, making decisions on behalf of the college during that time. But you can't really or shouldn't really make long-term decisions because you don't know if you're going to be the president or not. You're just a temporary president, substitute teacher. And so your substitute teacher doesn't make curriculum changes in what we're going to teach and where we're going to go. I'm just a sub. And so we'll wait for the real person to get appointed or step in.
Record?
I did hit record.
Alright.
Thank you much. And the interim position is sort of like it's not like, but it's sort of like the lame duck president. When we have a president that can't be reelected, they've been replaced by somebody else in November, and that person isn't going to take office till January. So we have 6 weeks or 8 weeks of somebody being president of the United States that really doesn't give a rip anymore. They may, as a human being, they may, but there's nothing making them. They have nothing to prove anymore. They are retiring as president. They will make $400,000 a year for the rest of their life as a former president of the United States. They have access to Air Force, whatever jets they want to go on speaking tours and so forth. They have a Secret Service detachment that is assigned to them and their family for the remaining portion of their life. So they have security at home. They have, which may be a benefit or a pain in the neck, depending on how you looked at it. But nonetheless, we spend a lot of money on that person. And so the decisions they make as those last few days of being president aren't really great ones for the country always. You know, they pardoned a bunch of guys in prison. They make moves of stuff that, gerrymandering type of things that they do during those last moments in office. Well, an interim president has a similar challenge. They don't have the authority long term, so they're not going to initiate long term kinds of things usually. They might do it, but it's not usually the next person that's president has to inherit that and clean up the mess or change it or redirect it, and it's very damaging to the organization. Start, stop, change direction, what are we doing, who's president now, kind of thing. And so the interim president rarely does anything other than just keep the status quo going, which means they don't advance, the technology very well. They don't, and that's true in a private organization or in a public institution like ours. So during that period of time, the governor appoints a search committee, and you heard the speeches that they gave and how that was done. We have a governing board, Dave Wolstenhume, who sat in the middle, did not do the talking, but sat in the middle to the right of Sherry that did the talking down there. He's the commissioner. He reports to the governor of the state of Utah. He runs University of Utah, Utah State, SUU, all of the colleges and universities in the state of Utah are under his command or board, and if they go well, he takes all the credit. If they go bad, he throws somebody else under the bus. However that works. But anyway, they then set out a search. They advertised it internationally. They got candidates for this job from London and from one from Africa, and a lot, 90 applicants in total that applied for the job. And then they set about selecting the local board here, the board of the college, helped narrow that down. They had committee meetings, looking at the resumes and reducing it to 6. And from those 6, they then interviewed them a whole day of interviewing, and they narrowed that field to a field of 3. And then last night they made the final recommendations to the state board of those 3, and then the state board met this morning and interviewed each of the 3 for an hour and a half apiece and made their selection that you heard them announce this evening at 5:30 or so. And that announcement appointed Jordan Rushton as the next president officially of the college, which is cool. He already has an office. He's been doing the job since May. I'm delighted that they elected him. The process, I think, while it's good and it's nice, it's not the way I want to do succession planning in my company. And I don't approve really of that way of doing it with tax dollars. And the why is, it turns out in this case, we get continuity. We get somebody that spent 8 years here at this college learning who we are and what we're doing and helping with the dreams and the direction of building the campus. And so to continue that investment, we call that continuity in an organization. And so having a new president that comes from outer space, there's a learning curve and there's a problem. We lose all of those relationships that have been built. We lose all of the momentum that we have as an organization. If there's been a train wreck, then it's not a bad thing to have somebody brand new come in and clean up the mess, because there's a problem. By train wreck, I mean a company that's run amok, it's crashed, it's got financially, it's almost limping or almost out because of bad decisions that a president administration has made. Somebody needs to help clean that up. Or if there was a a crime or fraud or some sort of thing that was committed on part of the management team, then that's a train wreck. And the organization needs to clean house and bring somebody in from the outside. But our data shows, and we talked about it in this class, that promoting from within is a far better investment for companies to make. You know who you're dealing with. When you go out for resumes, everybody say they type 40 words a minute, and everybody doesn't type 40 words a minute when you actually get them in there to do that. Hiring somebody that you've been watching type 40 words a minute, that's a sure bet. You know that person. They can do what they say they can do. It's not just words on a resume. All the rest of them, it's just words on a resume. Maybe they can and maybe they can't. So there's an advantage to the company hiring somebody from within and promoting them into a new area of responsibility. We see overwhelmingly companies that do that being more successful for a lot of reasons. And one of them is employees that work there know there's a promise that they might get that promotion someday. They know that they will be advanced within the company, and not every now and then somebody comes in and with corporate the hostile takeovers and corporate pirates and raiders. Mitt Romney was one of them, and there was a guy that they had who was kind of a hitman called Chainsaw Al, and I can't remember his last name right now. I'd have to look it up, but he went in and his job was to go into companies, clean everybody out, fire a lot of people, and reorganize the company, and that's what he did. Company after company, he managed that way, and that is destructive to an organization. So succession is necessary, but succession planning is something that we need to do. Succession is necessary because people get retired, people get married and leave town, people, things happen in life, and we're going to have a certain amount of turnover. So are we preparing people to take those people's places? Especially we look at certain demographics right now in America, we have an enormous number of people retiring. And when we look at the age workforce, even here in St. George at various companies you look at, there's a lot of people my age that are wanting to quit and wanting to play golf. We got a lot of golf courses here. It's nice. And so as these people exit the workforce, who are we preparing to take their place as a company? Are we grooming people to take over? So contrast what we just did and what you just saw with Jordan, which I think had a good ending. That's my 2 cents worth, but and I'm pleased with them making that decision. But it was still rather abrupt. He did not know this afternoon if he would have a job after tonight. And if they didn't pick him, if they picked one of the other two, where would he be in the organization? His former position has been filled by someone else. What do you do disrupting the organization to that interim president? And that was very scary, I'm sure, for him and his wife and family, wondering how that was going to turn out. Contrast that to what just happened in England. And you've got a handout you just put together with some things about succession to the throne in a monarchy. And we're going to watch this short video clip on that too as we talk about succession. We have a new king in England who has been being groomed to be king for 73 years. He knew. Everybody knew who was going to be next after Queen Elizabeth. So that was much of her life was spent knowing she was the queen and understanding the succession to the throne. And those are two contrasts. On one side, Jordan didn't know this afternoon if he was going to be president by tonight, and we had no idea who was going to be at the helm of the college until that was announced. England's had known for years who the next president is. And so when you think about, there's hope that he'll stop being a dick and be a good president, right? Or a king, he's not had to perform. He's been able to play. And we've watched him in the media play, right? And you're going, this guy's not king material, maybe, depending on your personal ethics and thoughts. But nonetheless, everybody knew he was going to be, unless Elizabeth outlived him. And it turned out she did not. And so now he's king. Let's hope that he went to some meetings at Parliament. Let's hope he was watching and learning. And let's hope that he does them proud. He's not our representative, so we don't care as much. But the British people care a lot, because the monarchy is their ego. It is who they are, and they don't want a clown damaging their ego. There's dignity of the title, and so it's important that he step out of the role that he was in, which was a figurehead, nothing role, right? Just the kid of the queen, and to step into a role of now it's mine, and the mantle of responsibility is on me. And often that's the case when we promote somebody in the organization. They're at this role, and then we give them a new role, and they step up to that role. They do things that they always were able to do, but we just never let them do, or we never asked them to do. And so in succession planning, we want to get them ready to do these things that they can't do now, but when they've got the job, we will need them to do it and do it flawlessly. That's kind of what succession planning is about. We are going to watch a series of discussions and have a conversation and a PowerPoint and some videos on succession planning, and we will be done. It's a short class because of our little field trip that we did, the little hors d'oeuvres that we got. But let's take a look for a second. You have this PowerPoint. We're not going to go through the whole PowerPoint, but there are a whole lot of people that are ready to retire. And there's increased because we've got more people of that age group, because the baby boomers were boomers because a population blew up at a short period of time in America's history, and they want to enjoy life while they have a chance. Most of the companies may say they do some form of succession planning, but of those that say they do, most of them say they don't have the right candidates. They don't have the people on the team to promote or to groom or to get ready. And this passing of the baton is something that is scary for a lot of companies. Sorry about that. I think that all of this is totally critical, but GE had 20 candidates to take Jack Welch's place lined up, talking to them, grooming, saying, one of you is going to be the next CEO of GE, General Electric. So big companies are doing some sort of succession planning, and I want us to look at when we look at one of the video clips. I got some 5-minute type videos that I wanted to see. One looking at succession planning in family business, which we have 2 family businesses represented here for sure, and maybe, well, we have 3 family businesses. Everybody's in a family business, St. George. And one talking about succession planning in a farm. I identify with that because in farming community, dad's a farmer, granddad was a farmer, and in that era, when the passing of the baton, one family to one family, the farm was growth in the market enabled the farm to sustain a retired family and a son. But for a farm to sustain 2-3 children and a farm, it's hard to do. And so succession planning in a family farm is very, very difficult. Do you not take care of one of the kids? What do you do? Or if you can't acquire more land because your neighbor's got the same problem, how do you pass on the business? And this is something that we all at some point in time will have to deal with and think about. But right now, one thing we can do, no matter if we've named or haven't named, we can start working on developing bench strength in the company. That's where we talked about matrix, cross-training, developing skill sets we were thinking about at the front line of the organization when we first brought that up. But really, the same thing applies to the executive suite. we mentioned how many people know how to do payroll or balance bank statements or close the books at the first of the month. That's not something that usually we have much depth on in a company. And in the organization, we need to, if we want succession, not of ownership, but succession of responsibility, growth, we need to develop more people that have the talent. So we need to be deciding where the talent is at in the organization and put together some sort of plan specifically that we will call succession management. So that little PowerPoint of sorts set the stage for a video or two that I want us to watch and have some conversations talking about. We'll watch one, take a break, which doesn't seem quite right. We just started, but we probably need to do that. This, we'll watch 7, and then 7, 1. Let's watch 2 and take a break.
Hi there, I am Chantal Jenkins, and I am happy to spend some time speaking with you today about a topic I enjoy, succession planning. In this video, I will introduce the operational benefits of successful succession planning. It would be fair to suggest that most organizations have both informal and written plans for succession planning. At times, senior leaders recommend internal candidates as successors when promotions are imminent, or perhaps when time is limited to conduct a robust search. Planning for succession should create a multi-generational and diverse pipeline for leadership. Realistically, we know that's not how it always works. Succession planning management is a deliberate and systematic effort by an organization designed to ensure leadership continuity in key positions, retain and develop both intellectual and knowledge capital for the future, and encourage individual advancement. Organizationally, succession planning allows those who make hiring decisions to be more in tune with the strengths and talents of strong internal candidates. In doing so, organizations must first begin to take a critical look at the current internal leadership pipeline. The next step in succession planning management is to define an action plan. If well designed and executed properly, your organization will continue to meet the intended workplace outcomes. Let's talk about the benefits. Succession planning at its core prepares the organization for the future and should be an essential priority. Succession plans can be built on a forecast of the future workforce and other factors to control upward mobility and organizational dynamics. Great succession planning intentionally builds a repository of diverse and qualified internal candidates that have the desire and skills to lead the organization to the next level. Developing existing personnel to assume mid-manager and senior leadership roles should be a priority for organizational leadership, departments, and human resources. It is not just top executives that are in desperate need of successors. According to the Pew Research Center, roughly 10,000 baby boomers retire each year. By 2030, 18% of America's workforce, as we know it, will be at retirement age. In many cases, there isn't a deep bench of talent, even for mid-level vacancies. If organizations wish to continue with growth, a workplace exit strategy is necessary to handle the decades of knowledge that will leave the organization with the boomers when this massive bulk of talent retires. Allowing employees nearing retirement the opportunity to share knowledge and skills with future leaders not only increases morale and collaboration, it adds to a more cost-effective workforce. When possible, it is also helpful to have overlap to allow for subject matter transfer of institutional knowledge. Additionally, employees in the pipeline who are made aware that upward mobility exists increases both their self-esteem and self-respect. The employee will also benefit greatly by participating in career development opportunities that lead them in the direction of their next opportunity or career advancement. Without a succession plan, an organization is most likely to spend more money, time, and resources filling leadership gaps. Instead, look at a succession plan as a cost-effective method for developing talent and positioning staff to fill current roles within organization. Organizations should have personnel ready and able to assume interim or permanent roles should someone leave voluntarily or involuntarily. To counter the unexpected, organizations should have at least one person with required skills to set up and a handful of personnel that are cross-trained to maintain workflow until the successor is identified. Allocating budgetary dollars to support internal and external professional development is also important. The opportunity to earn continuing education credits through non-credit or workshops also helps to enhance and develop existing skills. One great way to retain employees is to make them feel like valued members of the team. Purposeful value increases confidence. And millennials, who on average switch jobs every 3 years, may think twice about leaving the organization even if there's more money on the table elsewhere. Employees who are aware that they are being considered as part of a succession plan or pathway are often more committed, increasing the likelihood that they will commit to the organization for the long term. Make sure that employees are progressively exposed to challenging projects and responsibilities to increase leadership value to the team by allowing employees in the planning pipeline to lead team meetings and oversee projects. Key leaders should identify significant growth opportunities for the organization by reviewing the strategic plan in efforts to identify positions and skills required to support the continuity of the organization. This process should be part of outlining measurable goals. It may be challenging to have a robust succession plan without a comprehensive strategic plan that is reviewed regularly. In closing, succession planning is a process to develop new leaders and keep existing talent in the pipeline. It ensures that the organization is prepared for the future and increases the capacity of existing employees. All succession plans need to be in alignment with the long-term strategic vision of the organization. Succession planning is not about moving employees into management or leadership roles, but instead helping employees develop the tools and skills required to manage and lead should an opportunity present itself.
So in spite of the annoying computer voice, there's some interesting things that are started the conversation there that I want us to circle back on. Let's watch a second one, we'll take a break, have some discussion. I want to introduce you to 9-box method of evaluating and establishing a path forward for existing employees. So we'll do that right after break. 3 reasons why businesses struggle with succession planning.
Hello, my name is Tom Cox, and this is Leadership in Action. Our topic today, succession planning. For decades, companies have been dealing with succession planning. Books and articles have been written about it. Unfortunately, many companies tell us that they must go outside for talent, not by choice, but by need. Today, we are joined by Steve Drotter, Global Chairman of the Leadership Pipeline Institute. Welcome, Steve. Steve, how have you been involved in succession planning over the past 45 years?
Well, it's been my life's passion. I've been very emotionally involved in it. That's one kind of an answer. The more specific answer was 1968, I got to dabble in it a bit. And General Electric. It was their old system. It was very mechanical. In 1972, I was invited to corporate headquarters to help redesign succession at GE as they were breaking up from a big pyramid into strategic business units, and they wanted to have each business unit take more control for what they did, but the company wanted to stay in charge of who got the really key jobs. So I was the kid on the design team, and therefore when we finished, I was sent to install it in the businesses. So I went around to several businesses and spent a year or two there, getting it rolling. I got recruited out of GE because of that. A company in Philadelphia wanted me to come in and help them build their succession process and their management depth. After a year, they made me head of human resources. So I did that, did it there. It's easier to do inside from high levels. You know, you have a lot of leverage. Then I got recruited over to Chase Manhattan to run human resources there, so I got a chance to work with them on a global basis, or a truly global succession system. And then when I went into consulting, I decided that my product would be, out of all the things I could do, I would focus on succession. I'm only going to do one thing, and I'm going to do it really well. And so I've worked now with 150 companies around the world. Accumulated a lot of knowledge, made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of fun.
Interesting. So as you reflect back, going GE, different companies, Chase, et cetera, and including your consulting work, what would you say are the top reasons that organizations struggle with succession planning?
Okay, that's a terrific question. And there are a lot of reasons. I'll give you my favorites, okay, which I think are the top ones. And the very first one is that their succession planning doesn't flow from their strategy. That is, all they're trying to do is identify successors to positions. They're not looking at the strategy-driven need for change in people, and skills and leadership styles and geography. So it's like two separate systems, and so the succession thing doesn't really solve any kind of business problems for them. The second one is that managers don't make the hard decisions. I mean, to make succession work, you have to be willing to say, I'm going to take a risk on Mary, and I'm going to make her head of marketing Monday morning. Yeah, maybe she's not quite ready, but she's close enough. And between now and Monday, I'm going to have to take that marginal performer in that job and find something else for him to do. And I'm going to do it, and it will be done by Monday afternoon. Those are the hard decisions that you have. Some people, they walk up to those decisions, but they just won't make them. They talk about them, but they don't pull the trigger. The third one I would say is that managers don't develop their people. And the higher up managers don't develop themselves either. So if you want succession to work, people have to be growing. Everybody in your business has to be developed. So if the managers aren't doing it, then it's left to HR, and so development becomes sitting in a classroom as opposed to things you do on the job. Those are three big items. I can give you three more at some point if it makes sense. And then three more.
Well, thank you. Well, perhaps this next question you can elaborate a little bit. When you think about the fact that later this year, as I understand it, you're going to be publishing a book on succession planning. How will this book be different from prior books on the same topic?
Okay, good. My co-author, John Prescott, and I have 80 years of experience working on succession. John's a leading businessman in Australia. He's CEO of the biggest company there, chairman of 2 different corporations. He's sat on a number of boards, so he has his business perspective. I have the operational perspective from doing it in many, many, many companies, and so we are sharing our wisdom. So this is not a theoretical book. This is about what we've done and what we've made work, number one. Number two, it's comprehensive. It covers every major aspect of the requirements for good succession. So for example, how do you derive your people needs from your strategy? We have examples of that in worksheets. How do you get people to do the right stuff? What should senior management do? What should all managers do? What should HR do? And what should the board do? Because the board has a big role in this. So we have a lot of content about roles. You need a talent development review process of some kind. And so we go into detail about how to do that, how to launch it. Usually with a letter from the board chairman to the CEO, and then from the CEO to his or her people, stating the requirements, the things we want to learn about, the things we want to get done. And then those cascade down to the very first line of management. That's another reason it doesn't work well. Companies don't take it down far enough. It has to include all managers. And the development planning has to include all people. So we take a very comprehensive view of how to do that. We have very specific detail about how to identify people who can move up. And we've done this layer by layer based on concepts in the leadership pipeline, that there are layers of management, and as you move up, the work changes, and therefore the skill requirements change, and the time application and the work values. And so if you're looking at one layer, like first line managers, what tells you that they could move up to be a manager of managers? What are the markers, the 4 or 5 things that really discriminate? And then in addition, what are the 3 or 4 things that tell you you really shouldn't promote this person? Even though they're a good performer, if they're doing these things, they probably won't be successful at the next layer. I think that is truly unique information. I've never seen that written about anywhere. We have a detail about how to plan development, about where do development problems come from, and how do you address them. And then how do people develop, what's the sequence of things that they have to go through, and how do you work your way through that? How do you get a person from having a need? And the need can be positive or negative, and we try to treat it both ways. And positive need is, if you learn how to do this, you can run Europe. So there's a big upside for you if you'll just work on this skill here. And then also there's a negative need. If you don't fix this problem, you're probably going to lose your job. So you look at it both ways, and so we address it both ways. That's unique. We have a chapter on measurement. How do you measure your effectiveness, the results that you're getting? And so category by category, the things I've just discussed, we have at least 10 questions that for companies to ask themselves to help understand where they are, whether they're making progress or not, and what they need to do differently. And then we address the big pitfalls, the things that can go really wrong, and how to keep them from going wrong, like high potential programs. They go wrong almost everywhere, but there are ways to do it. So it's a comprehensive book. It has information I've never seen in writing anywhere. It's full of how-tos, examples, samples, and it helps the reader develop a philosophy about how to do this work. So we're very excited about the book.
That sounds like it, thank you. You touched on this a couple of times in describing the book. Could you draw out a little bit more specifically what role do the leadership pipeline principles play in a good succession model?
Okay. Well, way back in the 70s, when we started to build a new succession system for GE, we started to work on the idea that there were differences between layers, and we should learn to understand those differences and account for them in our succession work. Our guru at the time, Walt Mahler, drew the pipeline model, but he had really only 1 page of information about it. It was just the idea that there are changes, and you have to make changes as you move up. The pipeline was built to do succession planning. It was not built to do development, even though it's used widely around the world for development, because it helps with development, it helps you focus on what to develop on, so you can do both with it. And so our book is about what do the various layers do, what do first line managers do, and how do you tell if a first line manager can move up. So all through the book we're using the concepts of the layers and what's different about them to help clarify things like the role and promotability and development. So the leadership pipeline principles anchor the book.
Wonderful. Well, best of luck with the book, and I'm looking forward to reading it myself.
Great, thanks.
So I apologize for the guy saying he's all excited about his book. It's like, geez, dude, you don't have an excited bone in your body. However, his book is a good book, and this class is not about diving in and teaching that principle. That's a course in itself, but establishing the concept of succession planning at your company. If the company gets serious about talking about it, a couple resources, that would be one of them to have as a resource. When we come back from break, I'm going to talk about the 9-box method, and we'll apply it, and it's in one of your handouts. We'll watch another couple talk about the Queen and the King Charles, and we'll probably be done a little bit ahead of schedule because that's all we're going to talk about today after we talk about interviews. Take a break. See you back in a few. You what? Already? So what happened? Really? You protecting his kid and what are you gonna do? That's what the other thing is. Interesting. Yeah, it smells wrong. So what are you gonna give it? Yeah. Cool. And this is the place for solar stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Look, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's the new legislative thing that Biden signed in August. The new tax credits for solar investment, and that's just working right towards where you want. So, well, keep me posted, let me know what you say. If, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Somebody needs to go sell this to Walmart, right? Wow. Wow. That's a pretty business. Yeah. Well, you've learned something, of how to, go engage, take guys' work. But then when so. Okay. Okay, that's cool. That's kind of encouraging. That's good. I'm gonna run to the refrigerator, I'll be right back. All right, we will look a little bit at what's going on in
We want to
England.
turn now to NBC News royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. And Daisy, when we saw that statement from the palace this morning expressing concern for the Queen's health, the signal was very clear that there is something gravely wrong with the Queen's health. What are you hearing this morning?
Exactly that. Everybody, whether they're either royal watchers or just ordinary members of public here in the UK, I think once they've heard the news, they've heard the palace saying this is serious, the Queen's condition is serious, we know that the worst could be coming. Obviously people are hoping for the best, but I think people are now preparing for the worst. The smoke signals coming out of Holyrood, the fact that Charles's siblings are all travelling there, that is very significant, because on the death of a monarch, of course, the next in line to the throne is nearly always there, if they possibly can be there. At the moment of passing, Charles will then be the monarch, and at that moment, his siblings will have to kiss his hand and he will be the king. So it's not just that they would want to be there if their mother was poorly. For the siblings of Charles, there's a constitutional and a traditional element to this, which is another signal that this is very brave.
Daisy, does that, I mean, I'm listening to you say that it's quite extraordinary, both the personal reasons that a child would want to be at his or her mother's bedside, but this constitutional duty as well, quite reflective of the dual roles that this family takes on. But are we to understand that in a scenario like this, that Prince Charles would be sitting vigil at his mother's bedside? Is it that close, the constitutional requirement or desire?
I think the desire would be there. Constitutions, ours isn't written, the Constitution, that there are traditions and there are moments where the next in line becomes the king, and it's not on the coronation, it's the moment that the parent dies. So obviously that's deeply significant, but we know that Charles has been spending an unusual amount of time with his mother over the last few days and weeks whilst she's been at Balmoral. I mean, it's extraordinary to think that only 48 hours ago, the Queen was saying goodbye to Boris Johnson as the outgoing Prime Minister, accepting his resignation, and she was anointing Elizabeth Truss, Liz Truss, you see the picture there on your screen now, she was anointing her the next Prime Minister. That is only 48 hours ago. And obviously, we are all keeping everything crossed that this is a short-term bout to being bedbound and she'll be back. But there is something quite extraordinary about the fact that she clearly pulled out all the stops. She clearly strained every sinew to be there for that very, very important moment of public service and duty just the day before yesterday.
Yes, and in fact, for the first time ever, that meeting took place at Balmoral as opposed to at Buckingham Palace, a function of not only her commitment to doing it, but also the ability to travel, one assumes. Daisy, please stand by. We will continue to bring the very latest developments as we receive them.
So the
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube
question
channel.
there was really the issue of succession for country, they have laws and rules. Corporate America has policies in place that we put, that's not constitutional. It's obviously, it's not law. It's what are the rules of passing of power in an organization or promoting, if you want to use that term, promoting. Here the brothers and sisters of Charles have to kiss his hand, or had to. That was part of the succession procedure. Well, very formalized, as I said, 78 years in the 73 years in the making. Our succession plans aren't that exotic, but should be that purposeful in developing what it is we want to do next. The 9-box principle is in one of our handouts, and I'll fish that out while we're watching this. The 9 box is used in other things besides succession planning. It's a tool for management, helping to stratify a group of materials by a supplier, a group of products by quality, or in this case, a group of employees based on potential and performance. So looking at potential and performance, we use the 9-box tool to help us in our succession planning process.
Hey, welcome to this, your Wiley Manager 3-minute crash course. Today, Jed, we're talking about the 9-box, part of the succession management process.
Yeah, the 9-box process, which is really basically a tool by which you can assess the talent in your organization.
Right on. So Jed and I talk at length about this in our full-length podcast, which is available again on iTunes or at the Wiley Manager website. But very quickly, Jed, maybe you can describe exactly what a 9-box is, because otherwise it's just kind of an abstract thing for me.
Sure, it's basically it's a 3x3 matrix, which gives you, Bob, 9 boxes.
Hence the name 9-box.
And on the x-axis of these 3 boxes, you would measure an individual's performance. So you'd have low, medium, or high performance over a period of time.
Sure.
And then on the y-axis, so the vertical axis, you would try and assess an individual's potential. And again, you could because it's a 9-box, you'd have 3 levels: the low, medium, or high potential.
Right.
So then you have, the myriad of places you could put people within this 9-box, from, high potential and high performing to low potential and low performing, and everything in between.
Right. Yeah, and the fun part is that as opposed to just regular, the way usually people just take a look at performance, but you get what the 9-box does is it forces you as a manager to say, well, have I got anybody who's a high performer but low potential?
Yeah, most organizations would have some sort of measure of performance, whether that be your typical performance appraisal process.
Right.
Part of the discussion that gets missed in assessing talent is the potential part. So that's where the 9-box adds the values. You also assess the individual based on their potential, which you could measure a few different ways: low, medium, high. High might mean the individual has the potential to move up in the hierarchy at least 2 places.
Sure.
So 2 promotions. The medium one could mean that they have potential to move up, yes, but only one, probably based on what we're seeing right now. And low might mean they're great within the space in the organization in which they currently find themselves.
Right on. So can you have an employee that's a low performer but high potential?
You can have. You can have folks fit anywhere in this box. So if you have somebody that's low performing and high potential, you might argue that individual, man, we see this kid's got a ton of talent, but for whatever reason they're struggling in their current role. Maybe that current role just isn't the right spot in the organization for them. Maybe it's the wrong role. Great employee, bad placement. So let's talk about, I don't want to let this high potential employee go. Where could that individual add some value in the organization?
Right.
And that's the power of the discussion.
So it's a very simple tool, a powerful tool that both you and I have seen used in various places with great success. We assign people's names to these boxes, and then we build action plans around, okay, if that employee we were just talking about, somebody that is, we think they're high potential but somewhat low performing, we build action plans to get them out of that low performing rut into a place where they actually could in fact be a superstar.
Indeed, that's the power.
So without the benefit of the 9-box, that person could end up just exiting the organization. You'd think, well, another failed experiment.
They'd simply be low performing. Without that potential consideration, again, you might be losing some talent that could help you elsewhere in the organization.
Right on. Okay, well, very good. Well, that's a very good teaser for what we talk about on the full-length podcast. We invite people to go, again, pull that off iTunes, or you're welcome to go to the Wiley Manager website at www.wileymanager.com to pick up the whole discussion between Jed and I, as well as we've got some visuals on this thing, too, so you can actually see what we're talking about.
Very good, Bob.
We'll see you next time, Jed.
Thank you, sir.
So the 9-box, like I said, this tool is used for other things as well, but if you are looking at a department, for example, and you've got performance along this way and a read on potential this way, somebody's got a lot of potential, somebody doesn't have that much potential. That is something that is a dangerous judgment call, but it's one that people are making anyway. So having a more open discussion about that gets a little bit more agreement and gets somebody's bias usually put out, because you don't want to be the naysayer saying somebody's got no potential. I mean, how many people really have no potential? And that's not potential as a person, but potential in your organization. And it could be because there could be a reason for that. You know they are going to move in 6 months. They've announced that. They've got plans for that. They're graduating. They're getting a job. They've signed for it. They're taking it. So that's no potential. That doesn't mean they as a person are a loser. That means their life situation that they've announced means that they're not a long-term player in your organization. So the potential thing that you are looking at is going to be something that is up for discussion, but it should be a collective discussion between the supervisors and the bosses in the department, the area that the person's talking about. I would like to see virtually every employee in an organization somewhere on an appropriate 9-box. When I say appropriate, the executive team might be gauged differently than a engineering department that might be gauged differently than a working department. And so, but having this, I would like to know if my boss has a map like this, I want to know where I'm at. And it's a viable discussion to say where I want to be. If I've got long-term dreams with the company, I want to be here. So then the question is, if my boss sees me here, how do I get from here to here? What do I need to do? What do I need to show? What do I need to accomplish within the organization to move from here to there? I would want to know it as a player. But suppose that we don't identify the player that's there. We're just bosses talking about our team. How do we get that player from here to here? How do we help them? What do we do for them? How do we connect with them in such a way that we can get them and move them to different places in the box? And this isn't where they would go. Perhaps they go here, 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 right? You move, your performance improves, and then you climb from a potential perspective. So what I might do is, if there is let's say that there is a operations manager of the production manager in the company, and this is the production manager here. We could have a discussion and should have a discussion with that production manager that says, this is the field of people that we have that could be lined up to take your place. Should something happen with you, or should we have a better opportunity for you that we want to put you into? But we can't pull you into a better opportunity until we know what's on our bench. So there's a football game on now, probably, Kansas City probably, and so there's gonna be, the score's what?
No, I thought the other team, I think
No,
it was
it's 10-7. I know that. It's 10-7.
I'm hoping somebody.
I'm a KC fan, so.
Okay, so that team has a chart like this for who's going to take Mahomes' place. Sometime, if Mahomes gets hurt, if he gets recruited and paid more money by somebody else, there's rules within the league of how that's done. But this discussion for sure is happening, right? Of who are the players and who's this guy, and who's feeding, the rest of the group. I would want to know at Wilding who's going to take Andrew's place, and have Andrew's name up here, and have the rest of the team. This should start as a private conversation, right? With the team that's there, and put people's name in the boxes and say, do we have them in the right box? Is that fair to them? Do they think they're in that box? Because another way to do this is to have this discussion with your team and say, all right, here's the boxes. Put yourself in a box. Write your name in it. Give a blank sheet with the boxes. Where do you think you are in this organization? And get people to look at it, evaluate with more detail what that means in our company. When you look at the 9-box matrix, you'll see other materials. I thought I had the right, I printed the handout that talks more about it, and I did not. So I will give you an IOU on that, because I think this is a useful tool for not just succession planning. It's a useful tool as a business tool. But from the succession planning point of view, I'd have Andrew's name up here. I'd have other people in the organization that we would look at and say, you know, they're doing awesome where they're at. We knew from the start they were a growth employee. They've been, we trust them. They got the keys to the building. They close up at night. You know, we look at the various people that we can put in the various boxes, and then we can have a discussion with Andrew and say, do you agree with this, or you're participating in? And then when you know who this is, then that's the person that you start to develop. That's the person that you start to teach the stuff that knows how you do what you do, and then they will have their own box, 9-box, and they're looking and say, okay, if I'm going to have potential to move into this, who's going to move into mine? Who's going to be the next person in this square? And so there's not room for, you know, only one person in the square. We could have the whole group poised to take over. We could have everybody cross-trained to do everything, and we'd be a strong team. We'd be well set for growth, for change in the organization, for retirement, for people that when it comes time for them to do that. If we kind of have a depth chart where we have plans in place, what do we do with these unmotivated or misplaced people? Misplaced in the organization, not psychiatrist type thing. You know, they're just in the wrong seat on the bus and the spot, and they've got potential, but they're in the wrong spot. So how do we get them in the right spot where we can move them here? That's what succession planning is about. It's not replacement of the dead queen only. It is that, but it's replacement at the front line. You got somebody sanding wood all day long. It's an entry-level position. How do you promote them out? How do you put somebody else into that spot? Do you have to hire a new person? Or is there somebody else in the organization that really would like to insert themselves out of maintenance role or out of something in a production role? Or, you know, and so having this conversation with the team, I think, is viable and of value. Make sense? All right, a little bit more on succession then. Why family businesses fail to do succession planning. That's close to home in St. George.
Hi, this is Wayne Rivers at the Family Business Institute. Thanks for spending your time with us. As always, let us have the benefit of your comments below. So I want to talk about succession planning, as we do probably every other blog. It's just the big bugaboo for family businesses over time. There just never seems to be an easy way to do it. So today I want to give you the top 9 reasons that we think that family businesses fail to do succession planning. Everybody puts it on their to-do list. Everybody says this is going to be the year. By gosh, 2018 is going to be the year. We're going to get it done, and we're going to put together a coherent, strategic succession plan, and we're going to make it work. And then guess what? You get to December 31st, and it didn't happen. That's just the nature of family business planning, and I'm going to give you the 9 reasons why that's so. First, it's never urgent, right? There's a distinction between important things and urgent things. If you've seen Dwight Eisenhower had the matrix that he used for deciding how to focus his time. Were things truly important and urgent, or did they just appear to be urgent and weren't truly important? So succession planning is ultimately amazingly important, but it's rarely urgent, because unless there's a serious illness, then you can always do it next month or even next year. You can always get around to it. And the day-to-day stuff piles up, and it takes time away from doing this ultimately very important task in favor of your more urgent tasks. So it's easy to put off. The second reason is let me be blunt, the professional community, the bankers, lawyers, CPAs, financial planners, etc. They focus on the drop dead aspect because that's their training, that's what they do, that's what they're good at, that's what their contracts are about. They focus on the drop dead aspect of succession planning, and they give you a false sense of security. You need a drop dead plan, don't get me wrong. Absolutely you need a drop dead plan because you never know if lightning's going to strike and you don't want to leave your business or your family in a lurch. But the false sense of security that it creates is a problem because you go to the lawyer and the CPA and you do the estate plan and you take care of the taxes and my stuff's going to go here and my body, I want my body donated to medical science, all that other stuff. And you go, whew, golly, glad that's over. I got all these documents now and I just spent $8,000 and whew, man, more power to me. I've done a good job of succession planning. Well, no, you haven't. You've only addressed what happens if you drop dead. And let's hope you don't. What happens if you live? That part of the equation goes unanswered 90% of the time. The third reason is that you get employee or family member pushback. And this happens all the time. So let's say a family business, senior generation family business leader has 3 kids and they're all grown and they're all married. And mom and dad and the 3 kids and the senior managers in the business, they all want to get together and do succession planning. And they want to talk about a strategy for moving the business forward over the next 10 years. And somebody on the group says, maybe an in-law even says, no, I don't want to do that. It stirs up too many unwelcome memories and I'm just not going to. It is amazing how we let other people in our families have veto power over decisions big and small. So you get pushback from an employee. Well, we don't have time for that right now. Succession planning sounds great. I know we need to do it. But man, we've got 10 projects we're working on that are much bigger than that, and we just need to focus our time on that. Let's put it off 6 months. Well, okay, he makes a good point. Let's do it. You get pushback, and frankly, the senior generation leaders or the people leading the initiative lose heart, and they walk away from it. The fourth reason is psychological. It's always, 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 always easier to not change. If you think about it, right? So yeah, we need to do succession planning, and we need to hire some people and fire some people, and we need to invest more money in this area, and we need to have better IT, and we need to do all this strategy and succession planning. You know what? It's always easier and safer psychologically to not do it because doing succession planning and strategic planning is going to require that you undertake a process of change. And change is very threatening to us psychologically. So saying no, pushing it back, walking away from it, kind of you go, whew, wow, dodge that bullet. So we can put that off for another 6 months and we don't have to worry about it. Always easier, always safer. And there again, not to pick on the professional community, but typically CFOs, controllers, CPAs, their first answer is always no, because they're risk managers. They're there to manage risk on your behalf. If you let them get between you and your necessary entrepreneurial pursuits with a no, then I'm sorry, you're going to find yourself losing ground to your competition over time. But as risk managers, it's wise for them to say no because they see the needs of the business and they tend to prioritize urgent things over long-term important things. The fifth reason is how to. Okay? Those 2 simple words, how to. Succession planning is complicated. There's lots of moving parts. There's lots of people that need to be involved in the process. Somebody might not be happy with the process, which is another family or psychological risk. The how-to part is really nebulous for most family businesses. They know their business. They know their processes. They know their people. They know their customers. They know their vendors. They make decisions every day with less than perfect information. But this thing only comes along once a generation. The needs of the business, that's daily. I mean, my daily muscles are pretty well built up for making those decisions. My succession plan, that only comes up once every 20 or 25 years. So I don't have well-developed muscles for those kinds of decisions. And so you need the how-to. And if you, in the absence of the how-to, there's nowhere to go. I've heard this a number of times over the years, and it always puzzles me. People say, I know we need to do succession planning. We probably should get the Family Business Institute to help with it, but I don't know really what my goals are. And until I know my goals, then I really can't get professional help. That is poppycock. that is so wrong. Part of hiring a professional, whether it's an attorney or a CPA or us as a consultant, is to help you focus your mind on the realistic alternatives. What's the realistic menu of alternatives that you can pick from here? Okay, you don't know what your goals are. Well, can't a good professional shouldn't a good professional help you define what those realistic outcomes might be? That thing has always boggled my mind. The sixth reason people don't do succession planning is one of my favorites to talk about. There is a distinct lack of courage among next generation successors, whether family or non-family. It's almost like they revere the bosses or the senior generation in the company so much that they don't want to rock the boat. Really? Even sometimes the senior generation says, I would like to see more fire. This happens rather frequently, really. I'd like to see more fire for my successors. They just don't seem to have the same energy and commitment that I did when I was coming along. The lack of courage. How much courage does it take to go to the boss and say, we really need to think about what we're going to look like 10 years from now? Because you're not always going to be here, and you want to take more time off and travel with your spouse and all this other stuff. How much courage does that really take? But it is shocking to me. I can only name maybe 4 or 5 examples in my 29 years where successors have gone to the senior generation and said, look, we're going to do this succession planning. I want to know my future, or I'm out. And they actually had the courage to quit. And let me tell you something. That little handful of people are the most successful clients the Family Business Institute have ever had. They took they're all family businesses, the ones I can think of. They took their dads' companies, all of them were their sons taken over from fathers, and they took a little kind of an unknown pipsqueak of a company and turned it into something magnificent. Those people had courage. And I wish that so many more of our 35-year-olds and 45-year-old next-gen successors, family or non-family, it doesn't matter, had the courage to really push, to say, we need this as an organization. You're going to lose your best people if we don't have a pathway for them to see themselves in the future of this business. It really is a huge frustration. I guess you couldn't tell. It's a huge frustration for me. All right, the 7th reason, the senior generation is worried about fairness. So we did a poll years ago, it's a long time ago now, and 80% of our customers had children in the business with them. 80% also had children who weren't in the business. I mean, there's overlap in that number, obviously. So if you think about it, the majority of family businesses today have both employee family members and non-employee family members. And the senior generation always worries about, well, God, the business is worth $5 million, but I don't have that much other stuff. So if I give the business to my employee children, then my non-employee children aren't going to be treated fairly at inheritance time. What do? They get so wrapped around the axle about fairness. Come on, man, that's not that hard of a problem. Go out and buy some life insurance, or figure out a way to give them all the business equally and just put there's so many ways to overcome that. But they let that be the big 600-pound gorilla that just blocks any progress. I don't know how to be fair to my children. Hey, man, get some advice. It ain't that complicated. You think you're the only person that's ever been in this situation before? The 8th reason is that people view family business succession planning as an event, not a process. So here it is, Q1 2018, and Dad says, okay, look, I'm tired, I'm 70 years old, I'm going to be out. December 31st, I'm out. Get ready. Well, it's not like you don't have a busy job as a successor. It's not like everybody's not occupied. What do I even need to know to be ready to run the company? So there's little mentoring, there's little preparation, there's little time invested, and really it's like an event. I'm going to be on December 31st, I'm going to be out, and you're going to be the new president, and Sally, congratulations, get to it. And Sally doesn't know where to even begin, and Mom and Dad aren't much help because they're just not much. They're doers. They're not teachers. They're not mentors. And then the final reason it costs too much. I don't want to go to my lawyer and CPA and spend thousands, and I don't want to hire a consultant. It just costs a fortune. We'll just figure it out on our own. Well, it's not cheap. I mean, lawyer fees and CPA fees and professional consulting fees, they're not cheap. But at the same time, if you have a business worth preserving, you have to look at it now as an expense. It's an investment with a predictable return. So let's say just, hey man, let's have fun with this as a consulting firm. You spend $100,000, you won't. But let's just say you spend $100,000. But if you can preserve the value of a business worth $1 million, or $5 million, or $100 million, I mean, really, is that investment not a drop in the bucket? So those are the top 9 reasons that family businesses fail to do succession planning. If you're stuck with one or more of these challenges, by all means pick up the phone and call And man, we'll talk you through it, try to get you pointed in the right direction. And as always, we'd love to have your comments below. This is Wayne Rivers at the Family Business Institute.
All right, we've got one more and some comments I want to make about that, and then we will switch to one other topic before we go.
Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. We're going to be talking about the 4 new rules for CEO succession planning. And joining me is Bob Stark, who's the co-leader of Spencer Stuart CEO Succession Advisory Services. So, welcome, Bob.
Thanks, TK. Glad to be here.
So it's no secret that selecting, evaluating, and rewarding the CEO is certainly one of the core responsibility of corporate boards. I know in the 25 plus years that I've been working with boards, the CEO succession issue and bringing it up has always been sort of sensitive. Boards don't feel like they have as good a grip on it, maybe on the process as they should have. And now we're sort of seeing the heat being turned up just a little bit, mostly because of what's happened in this past year and companies having to adapt to all the events and change maybe their direction a little bit, and things are happening and you have to decide whether the CEO is the right CEO. So what factors do you think are impacting both CEOs and boards that are going to be sort of in the market for a new CEO?
Yeah, DK, I think it's helpful to reflect upon where we were with CEO succession pre-2020, talk a little bit about how 2020 has changed things as a way to understand better where we're headed with CEO succession. So I've had the pleasure of helping boards oversee value-creating CEO successions for about 20 years. And generally, boards have been getting better at CEO succession processes. But lots of boards start too late or don't follow best practices, and the consequence can sometimes be value-destroying CEO transitions. But even for boards that have a really good process, CEO succession was getting tricky even pre-2020. Even then, we were talking to directors about the VUCA world, increased volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And these forces were making it more difficult for directors to predict the future, to predict what the business situation would be, the strategic and organizational imperatives of the future, and the implications for the CEO mandate and CEO profile. And so boards were starting to bet more on potential and less on experience because of that uncertainty about the future. And then, of course, 2020 was the great amplifier of increases in complexity in the external environment. It was also the great accelerator of 2 other important trends. One, stakeholder activation, so many more stakeholders finding their voice. And 2 is the business and moral imperative to increase diversity in leadership. And as a result of all these forces, CEOs are more in the spotlight than ever. What was already a very difficult job has become even more difficult for CEOs. And it has really important implications for CEO succession planning in the future.
So Bob, I know that Spencer Stuart certainly has done a lot of research and certainly has experience in the CEO succession process. And recently you guys have been working on some new rules or principles that people should follow, which is helpful particularly during today's time for this process. So can you review those for our audience?
Yeah, happy to. Given these changes, changing demands on the CEO that we talked about and the implications for CEO succession, we think there are 4 principles that are really important for boards to follow. So the first is develop a multidimensional view of the future CEO profile. And the second, expand your options. Third, bet on potential. And then the fourth, think CEO plus. And I'll explain each of these and expand upon them in order. The first, every CEO succession process needs to start with a target. What will be the future strategic and organizational imperatives, and what are the implications for the next CEO's mandate and profile? As I mentioned, it's getting harder for boards to predict the future and to anticipate what that future CEO mandate will be. And that requires a more dynamic view of the CEO profile. Let me share an example. So I have a client, a director saw me present a few years ago and introduced me to the CEO of a Fortune 100 financial services company. CEO was very high performing, still is, but the board didn't have confidence in their succession process. They didn't really feel like they had one, and they didn't know the internals well. And so through a series of conversations with the head of HR and the CEO, we designed a leadership development program for the top 10 executives, and then in parallel, a CEO succession process for the board to get more comfortable with the internals and more optimistic that they would have ready internals when the time came. The first thing we needed to do with the client was to figure out the future CEO profile or mandate. The challenge was that they had to think about different time horizons, and they had to think about different business circumstances or situations. How far along would they be in their business model transformation? Would the competitive set change to include non-traditional competitors in the future? Given the importance of these factors, we decided to design a 2-dimensional view of the future profile with time on one axis and the business situation on the other. And then the mutual challenge was to figure out whether or not they actually had successors to fill in the different cells in that chart, and where not, to have strategies to fill it in over time. And this profile is not fixed. So in late every year, we revisit the profile and make adjustments, and late 2020 was no different, especially given the changes in stakeholder activation and the increased demands on communication for the CEO, and the recognition that the next CEO would need to be an advocate champion of diversity and inclusion. We updated the profile. And that brings me to the second principle: expand your options. So boards increase their odds of having ready internal successors by starting early and casting a wide net. And it's important to look at beyond the most likely internal successors to consider lower possibilities who may be the right solution given the business circumstance in the future and their development trajectory. Andrew Wilson at EA Sports and Chuck Robbins at Cisco are 2 examples of CEOs that we call leapfrog CEOs. They didn't report directly to the CEO at the time they were announced to be the incumbent successor. We had the opportunity to work with both clients, and one of the keys to the board's decision was understanding their potential. So we were able to provide insights about the potential for Chuck and Andrew to stretch beyond the limits of their experience and to continue to adapt and grow once in the role. And these insights were critical to the board getting comfortable with them as successors. And in Chuck's case, he was one of 14 leaders in the assessment and development process for Cisco's CEO succession, which illustrates the importance of casting a wide net. And this brings me to the third principle, which I've already previewed, bet on potential. Because the future is so uncertain, and because CEOs are constantly faced with complex, novel issues for which their past experience could never fully prepare them, the capacity to grow and adapt once in the role becomes even more important. I got back into professional services 20 years ago because I saw this opportunity to more accurately assess potential in senior leaders and then invest differentially in their development. In addition to these elements of capacity to handle complexity, adapt, and learn, we're hearing more from boards about elements of character or personal qualities. So in the past, many personal qualities lived in the appendix, but they are now on the first page of CEO profiles, qualities like humility, empathy, resilience, and courage. And we've all seen over the last year leaders who exhibit these qualities thriving, whereas those lacking these qualities have struggled. But none of us want to live through another 2020, so it's important for directors to think about how do we create roles, how do we put people into roles that test these qualities so we can understand whether or not they have them. And finally, the fourth principle we call CEO Plus. With the increased breadth and complexity of the CEO role, the modern CEO is more dependent than ever on a really strong team around them. The board needs to understand the strengths and gaps that keep people to key roles so they understand the full mosaic when they're making their decision about the next CEO. Is the CFO nearing retirement? Will the role change before or after a CEO transition? And what about the CHRO? Do we have strong divisional presidents? And do we have the diversity we need for the future? So just to recap, the four principles are: develop a multidimensional view of CEO, the CEO profile, expand your options, bet on potential, and think CEO Plus.
So Bob, I don't want to understate how important this process is or how challenging it is, okay? You know, when you look at some of the extreme cases, sometimes boards have to replace a CEO who's actually done fine, okay? Meaning there's no real problems, but is just not equipped for, let's say, the digital transformation age or something else that happens. And decisions like that are really important, okay, for the future of the company, and very difficult. I think maybe the hardest decision of all, okay? And then you look at just the issue of, you know, you talk mainly about insiders. Well, sometimes that insider, you know, just isn't there, okay, in the planning. So then you have to go to the outside, which is certain, we all know is certainly a harder process than identifying somebody from the inside. So I just want to make sure our audience knows we appreciate, first of all, how important and how difficult this assignment is. And that, again, doesn't speak to the challenge of sitting down with a CEO, trying to have this discussion and make sure they know that this isn't any lack of faith or trust in what they're doing. It's just important to go through.
It's such a, you made several important points there, TK. One of them that has not changed over the years is that boards find it difficult to engage in this conversation with CEOs. That's because they're worried it will send the wrong signal to the CEO, a vote of no confidence. The good news is that I think boards have been starting early on CEO succession and treating it as a normal function of the board, so it's really no news. The other really positive trend is that more and more, and hopefully many of the directors listening have this experience, more and more CEOs are getting out in front of this. And as the example I gave of the financial services firm, talking about it as leadership development. And that's a good way in for boards too. If they need to get a conversation going, talk about leadership development, talk about something that's further out into the future, so that the board and the CEO can align and it's a non-threatening conversation.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you. This is certainly a topic that should be on everyone's agenda, including ours here at the show. So I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us and sort of bringing us up to date on, where we should be with the process.
Thanks, DK. Pleasure to be with you.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's.
In that conversation, they're only talking about CEO succession, and they do that because that gets the attention of the board of directors, and that's a problem in larger corporate America, the Fortune 500 companies. It's not so much the CEO that's the conversation of our succession planning. Our succession planning really is every key role in the organization. Who's going to take that if the current person gets another job or gets has an illness or something occurs? That's our reason to strengthen the organization, is to have a plan, and once you have that plan in mind, talk to me about it. If I'm one of the employees, show me the box I'm in now, show me the box you want to move me into and how I can get there, and have some discussion. And if I know that there's that plan in place, then I'm going to be much more patient within the organization. I'm going to be much more loyal within the organization. Eli was talking about this very thing 2 or 3 classes before and after, the whole issue of, as a reasonably new employee in an organization that has a high number of retiring people in the next half of a decade, where are the opportunities? And what we saw is the companies are hesitant to talk about the opportunities because they don't want to dangle out a contract or a promise, because they got to see. We don't know what your performance is going to grow into. We know what it's now, but we don't know what it's going to grow into, and we don't know quite how committed you are to us and how committed we are to you. It's kind of a stalemate of sorts, right? But the conversation is viable to say, in principle, here's the areas that are going to clear out when people retire. We need some people that can be knowledgeable in all of their skill sets. That's not a commitment for long-term employment. That's saying, to get there, we want your performance to acquire these capabilities and competencies. And that is succession. It's identifying people that could grow into the position. It's not promising the position. It's they could grow into the position. And it gives us where we're going to go to if there's an emergency. Somebody's wife gets sick and they can't come to work for 3 months. What are you going to do? You know, do you have a plan in place that you know who you're going to go to and say, hey, I need you to step up for 3 months? Not your job yet, but you know, we've got a bind going on here. And fortunately, we've had the conversation. We've had the thought. And I think that at every level of the organization, if we know who it is or the type of people that we're trying to identify to go into those positions, you know, how cool it would be if you were grooming your next manager, your next replacement right now. You kind of knew who it was going to be, and maybe you certainly don't promise it to them because you don't have the authority to do that, and it's not smart to do. But to have it in the back of your mind and have a conversation and say, I'd like to see you be able to take my place someday. And I want you to know what I know. And then that frees you up to all of a sudden you can be a zone manager, you can be Papa Denver, whatever it's going to be in that direction. I want to end up class with a discussion that I've wanted to have several times here. Did I shut it down? I didn't, but it did shut down, so hang on a second, I gotta find this. I want to talk about how to interview and how to conduct a 20-minute interview. We talked about that in class, and we know that people were in the interviewing process. Jake just added somebody who made a job offer and they accepted today. That's good news when you see that happening.
Can you show it?
This comes from a handout that you've had before.
Fingers crossed, right?
The front of the handout looks like this is the 7 reasons people leave. The 7 hidden reasons. So if you have that, it's 50 pages or so. Somewhere in that handout, we get to putting it on the screen so if you don't have the handout with you. We're on page 18 of that handout. Conducting a 20-minute job interview. I want us to read that paragraph at a time. If I've got it big enough that you can see it, or if you have it in front of you, we're gonna read this document. I'm gonna talk about it, draw a picture, while you, or as we develop this, so you get an idea of what we're talking about. You wanna start the reading process, Eli?
Yeah, with its increased mobility, constant competition for top players, and instant dissemination of openings throughout the world, the current job market breeds an increasingly savvy crop of applicants. What's more, motivated job seekers can draw from innumerable seminars, courses, arid books to hone their interviewing skills. The interviewer, on the other hand, probably holds as few interviews as possible to keep his or her staff up to strength. Keep going.
Yep, Pastor, we're gonna read around the room, so read until you don't wanna read, and then we'll
When a
pass it on.
candidate's interviewing skills collide with the interviewer's urgent need to hire, he or she may be talked into making a regrettable decision. In the name of caution, the interviewer holds endless rounds of 1 to 3 hour interviews, and his or her work suffers. Both pitfalls are avoidable by taking a few common sense measures. You'll spend less time interviewing than you do today. At the same time, you'll maintain control of your interviews, learn more, and increase your ability to make the best hiring decisions. The interview for hire process involves 8 basic steps. Master them and you'll improve your decisions and free up your calendar.
I told the class earlier that if you want to improve your odds and hijack the interviewing process, is you try to control it. If you're the candidate, if you're the person that's trying to apply for the job, and so Eli picked up on that, and what he read and said, you want to maintain control if you're doing the interview. Start reading. You will.
Define the job before filling it. Obviously, clarify the job to be filled before filling it. Too often, that process is done in reverse. Don't make this mistake, or you might hire a perfect candidate for a job that doesn't exist. When creating a job description, solicit the input of current employees in similar positions. They know what the real job entails. Using these employees as guides, set realistic standards and qualifications. An exceptional candidate won't be attractive unless the exceptional compensation and opportunity is offered. Be sure your hiring standards relate to job performance. Legally, you must be prepared to demonstrate that all standards relate to reasonable performance of the job and that they don't discriminate against any group based on age, race, gender, religion, national origin, marital status, or physical handicap. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission enforces the stipulation and provides guidelines. Include all pertinent details in the description, such as benefits and shortcomings of the job, career potential, working environment, and special responsibility and demands. Before seeing candidates, those involved in the hiring process should sign off the filial job description. Refine and revise the description until clearance was given. The resulting document keeps everyone on the same wavelength. It is also a helpful tool to use during the interview.
When you're first starting in this career, you probably were advised to interview for new jobs occasionally, regardless of your interests or qualifications in the job. Keep in mind that some of your candidates may be following the same steps.
Oops, too much. Sorry.
To save time, screen all candidates before meeting them, study their resumes, ask them to fill out an application form, check their references, then disqualify anyone who's unfit for the job with the facts check out, the telephone candidate before the actual in-person interview, before meeting the candidate. Make sure he or she is serious about the job change.
It's harder for us to do, and it's hard to find people to apply, but Andrew?
Organize and prepare. Like any meeting, a clear agenda for the interview increases your efficiency and effectiveness because only 20 minutes are being allocated to the process. Every minute counts. The heart of each interview is your question period. Write out specific questions based on the research acquired in step 2. Type them for easy reference. Assume the candidate will be prepared for the interview. The interviewer should have a job description, questions, and a notepad within easy reach. In addition, have a company information kit available for the candidate. If the candidate must relocate, The information kit should profile the company's area and region, include information of interest to every member of the family. Typically, applicants want to know about schools, hospitals, medical care, places of worship, and social, cultural, and recreational opportunities. The local Chamber of Commerce usually can provide such literature and information.
Often we're interviewing for jobs that, you know, people might move to St. George to take. You know, it might not just be a frontline worker position.
Set a friendly tone, 2 minutes. Despite a need to be brief, don't be curt or the interviewee will be uncomfortable and uncommunicative. Set the subject at case. Choose a comfortable, quiet setting for the interview and make sure he or she won't be facing bright lights or the direct sun. Keep the applicant out of an air conditioning draft and make sure the chair isn't too low or too high. To minimize distractions, ask your secretary to hold all calls and interruptions. When the applicant first arrives, greet him or her with a smile, warmth, and enthusiasm. Small talk helps break the ice. Offer a sincere compliment about a strong point on the resume or favorable remark made by a reference, because only the strongest candidates are being met. This should be accomplished easily. This is one benefit of performing step 2.
So in step 2, you screened them right. You're interviewing best right. So I've got 2 minutes allocated to saying hi. Establish a warm tone. We're establishing the tone. We want them to be impressed with who we are, how we have our act together. You've got a packet for this. You've got a comfortable spot for that. You've got a pleasant condition for them to sit down and have an interview. So that doesn't take you but 120 seconds. That's just, you know, how you got there. Now, back to, over to Jake.
Because you initiated the meeting, you're expected to chair it. So the first step is to lead smoothly from small talk to the interview, or into the interview. Give a summary of what wants to accomplish today. Briefly describe your role in the company as well as the position by title only for which the candidate is being interviewed. One possible conversation is, we have a unique and attractive opportunity for the right individual. I'd like to spend the first part of our meeting discussing your background, and I'll share some information about the position with you and give you a chance to ask questions. This is just an initial meeting for us to get acquainted, and it should take about 20 minutes or so. You've kept your options open, so now either the interview can be extended as necessary, or your schedule can be adhered to without making the candidate feel cut short.
Okay, so you established the fact that we may talk more. Go ahead and close that out.
The reason the candidate is questioned before being offered a description of the position is elementary. Most candidates will slant their response to make themselves appear ideally suited. They need unbiased information. However, you want the applicant to understand that they're in control.
So how is it that we're taking control? It's by simply saying an outline of what this is what we are going to do. You know, you say that, and we've allowed 2 minutes to that. So we've got 2 minutes to make them feel welcome, set a tone, pleasant, comfortable. We set 2 minutes to get the point across that I'm controlling this interview. This is not a hard sell. You are in charge of the interview, but this keeps you on track really, because you want to talk about the job. You want to talk about how bad you want people there, and don't go there. Don't do that. We've got 4 minutes spent so far. Eric, take us into the 10-minute spot.
Ask questions. Before the appointment for the interview was made, the candidate's qualifications were determined. Now explore whether he or she is right for the job. Evaluate style, chemistry, and attitude. Express any concerns that arose when reading the candidate's resume and talking with references. Although this is the longest segment of the interview, 10 minutes will be adequate only if the questions are concise, and you encourage equally concise answers. The interviewer's questions should cover 2 areas in particular: the candidate's experience and his or her personal qualities. Seek whatever additional information that's necessary about the candidate's background, skills, education, credentials, and accomplishments, as well as the job performance strengths and weaknesses. Ask about the candidate's interests, ambitions, attitudes, and personal style. The following sample questions will prepare you for the interview process. Please, you want to read those?
Yeah, we can go ahead and read it.
Okay. Please describe your present job responsibilities, which are most difficult and why, which are the most enjoyable. What accomplishment in your present job are you most proud of? What was your best idea regardless of implementation? What would you like to have accomplished, haven't in your present job? What prevented you from doing so? What particular strengths and weaknesses would you bring to this position? What do you know about our company in this position? What would it take to succeed in this position? What elements are important to your job satisfaction and that of your subordinates? Describe what qualities would make an ideal boss for this position. What are your short and long-term career objectives? What are the biggest frustrations in your career? What might your present company and department do to become more successful? What are your hobbies and interests? Are they useful to your career and balancing the rest of your life? How would you describe your personality? How would your associates describe you? How did your spouse and children feel about this position change? Why should we hire you? Avoid questions that may be discriminatory. For example, acquaint yourself with the candidate as a person, but don't ask about religious beliefs or sexual preferences.
That's a lot of reading. Thanks for doing that. But I wanted us to hear those questions because we do need to have questions ready to ask. If you aren't sure those are pretty good questions, right? Not every one of them. How do your spouse and children feel? That's only legal if you already know they're married and have children. You can't ask them if they're married and have children. If they've declared to you are, you can ask that question. Otherwise, that's an illegal question. So now we've got 14 minutes spent. We are back to Eli.
Sell the opportunity, 3 minutes. In this step, entice the superior candidates to want the job. Begin by telling the candidate how you feel about the job. We feel we have an outstanding opportunity and I'm excited about it. Whoever assumes this responsibility will be important to our overall success. That's why we're determined to hire the right candidate. Describe the job opportunity in general terms. Again, avoid biasing the candidate's answers in subsequent interviews. Therefore, share general information regarding responsibilities, reporting, relationships, job benefits, and shortcomings. Don't, however, tell the candidates what you like or dislike about his or her background relative to the job in question. Don't reveal that his or her boss-to-be is looking for a golf partner or distrusts people who wear bow ties. It's wise to work from the written job description during this phase of the interview. Although you'll choose what to reveal in each case, you'll also want all the facts at your disposal. This is a good time to summarize the history and growth of the company. State the firm's reputation, market position, and organizational structure as it relates to the candidate's prospective job. Don't oversell or exaggerate the opportunity. False expectations are a major cause of employee turnover. As any salesperson will tell you, overselling often kills a deal that otherwise would have worked. It's better to underplay the opportunity during this first meeting. That statement doesn't contradict the advice about showing enthusiasm about the position. Be enthusiastic, but reserve some details of the job to elicit the candidate's further interest and excitement in subsequent interviews.
Okay, this is the first interview, and you may wind up interviewing again. We now are down to the last 3 minutes. So we've set the tone, welcome. We've put an outline together that exhibits we are in control. We spend 10 minutes asking questions. We spend 3 minutes in the sales pitch, and then we wrap up with answering any questions and closing. Read that to us if you will.
Answer questions and close, 3 minutes. In this final step, the candidate has the opportunity to ask questions about the prospective job. An aggressive candidate will try to assume control throughout the interview, so don't allow that to happen. Reduce the candidate's questions to a minimum by saving them for the end. Furthermore, many questions will have been answered during the flow of the interview. Once the question period begins, however, let the candidate know that this is his or her opportunity. By now you have a good sense as to whether the candidate should be invited back for subsequent interviews. Accordingly, you can expand the interview or keep it brief at this time. If the candidate asks sensitive questions or makes inquiries about matters that you don't want to discuss yet, such as compensation or hiring dates, explain that these subjects will be covered during subsequent interviews. Expect candidates to ask some of the following questions before accepting position with your firm.
Now, we're not gonna read all of those questions. Go to this.
Close all interviews on a positive note. Thank the candidate for his or her time and interest and let him or her know what to expect next. Say, for example, we'll be interviewing in this first round for the next 2 weeks. We'll let you know by the end of next week as to whether and when we might meet again. If he or she is a prime candidate for hire, say a few words of encouragement. Let him or her know you feel good about the meeting and you look forward to the next meeting. The benefits of a well-prepared 20-minute interview are clear. Following this approach, you'll accomplish your purpose quickly. In less than half an hour, you'll gain straight insight into each pre-qualified candidate while selling the opportunity so it encourages the prime candidate. There are also other benefits of this short interview. The candidates who are to be invited back will be flattered that it took only 20 minutes for the interviewers to see possible value to the organization. At the same time, applicants who aren't past that find the bad news easier to swallow. After all, they weren't required to sit through marathon interviews just to be rejected. Of course, the short initial interview necessitates one or more of the additional interviews before hiring. This too is an advantage. Most candidates prefer to be courted and given consideration by several parties before a decision is made. In addition, interviewers also need some time to reflect on the candidate and his or her suitability for the job.
I don't think we need to finish. You've got to, that's just a wrap up kind of what they're trying to say. So we have 20 minutes. Set the tone, make them feel welcome, give them an outline of what you're going to do, 10 minutes asking questions, 3 minutes selling the job from your point of view, and 3 minutes answering whatever questions they have, and then get out. 20 minutes means you can conduct 3 interviews in an hour. I have seen people just let that get out of control. 3 interviews take up their whole morning, and they're just not, because they're not good at it. You don't have to have somebody back for a second interview, by the way. For some of the jobs we're interviewing for, in 20 minutes, you'll know if you want to hire them or not. And so waste little of your time, maximize it with a concise interview that you have control. So I think that's a cool set of guidelines. You have that in a handout. If you've misplaced it or whatever, let me know. I'll print you another one. I think that you should apply something like that to how you teach people around you how to do interviews. Keep them legal. We've covered that too, right? Ask legal questions, and then keep control of the time. Speaking of control of time, I'm 3 minutes early. We're out. We're done. Thank you all for participating in the announcement of our new president and watching that process. Have a great weekend. We will see you on Tuesday. Jake asked the question about your PowerPoint presentation assignment, when we're going to do those presentations. We're going to start those a week from today, Thursday and Tuesday of that week. So that's coming up.